Roger Federer's inner circle just said something that brought the entire tennis universe to a sudden, breathless standstill. And the name they attached to greatness wasn't Swiatek, wasn't Sabalenka, wasn't Gauff. She is the next legend. Those precise words spoken about a 20-year-old woman from the Philippines, who 12 months ago nobody outside Manila had bothered to mark on their calendar. And here is what makes this moment so gut-punch powerful. This wasn't flattery. This wasn't hollow praise buried inside a promotional press release. This was a deliberate, public, full-throated declaration from the man who coached the greatest tennis player who ever lived, delivered on live television with the entire sport watching closely. But before you understand why those words carry the weight of a Grand Slam trophy, you need to understand the journey first. Because what Alex Eala went through to reach this moment wasn't just impressive, it was borderline impossible. This is the story nobody fully told. And by the time this ends, you will understand exactly why the crowd went silent and why that silence meant absolutely everything. Picture a tennis court in Manacor, Spain. Blazing heat, red dust, rising off clay. A 14-year-old Alexandra Eala just landed from the Philippines, racket gripped tightly, watching players twice her size and twice her experience moving with the kind of mastery that takes years to properly develop. She had no ranking, no WTA points, no guarantee that any of this would eventually work out in her favor. What she carried instead was something considerably rarer. The kind of quiet, burning ferocity that never announces itself until the precise moment it completely detonates. Born on May 23, 2005 in Quezon City, Philippines, to a businessman father and a mother who once stood on a podium at the 1985 Southeast Asian Games as a competitive swimmer, Alex Eala arrived in this world with athletic instinct woven directly into her DNA. At 14, her family made a decision that permanently redirected everything about her future. She would train full-time at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca, Spain. That wasn't merely a coaching arrangement. It was an act of extraordinary, unwavering belief in a teenager's potential. The Rafa Nadal Academy doesn't produce tourists or hobbyists. It produces serious, battle-hardened competitors. Within 2 years of arriving on Spanish soil, Eala sent a quiet but unmistakable signal to the wider tennis world. She captured the Australian Open junior doubles title in 2020. Then, almost immediately afterward, she claimed the Roland Garros junior doubles crown in 2021. And in 2022, she made history by becoming the first Filipino ever to win a Grand Slam junior singles championship, seizing the US Open junior title, and climbing all the way to world number 2 in the junior rankings. Championships, records, history made, and still the professional game wasn't truly listening. Because junior tennis and professional tennis exist in entirely different universes. The junior circuit rewards raw potential and natural talent. The WTA Tour punishes inexperience with cold, merciless efficiency. You can completely dominate under 18 competition, and then walk onto the main draw at Miami, and get dismantled inside 45 minutes by someone ranked 200 positions above you. That brutal gap between junior greatness and professional survival has quietly swallowed careers far more decorated than Eala's ever was. Her early WTA appearances told a painfully familiar story. Early exits, qualifying round defeats, matches that simply didn't go the direction her talent genuinely deserved. By the close of 2024, she had worked her way up to 143rd in the world rankings. A number that doesn't earn you main draw entries at the sport's biggest and most prestigious events, doesn't keep sponsor phones actively ringing, and certainly doesn't place you anywhere on anyone's shortlist for a serious legend conversation. She was ranked 143rd in the world. Just another promising name sitting on a very long list of promising names that professional sport regularly and quietly forgets about entirely. But here is what that ranking completely failed to capture. What no ranking ever truly captures about a person. It didn't measure the way she trained past midnight when every other player had already gone home to rest. It didn't quantify the countless hours she spent methodically rebuilding her serve, sharpening her backhand redirect, carefully developing the tactical intelligence that would later reduce a 5-time Grand Slam champion to little more than a supporting character in her highlight reel. The ranking was only a snapshot of her present situation. It knew absolutely nothing about the future she was privately building. And that future was about to arrive without any warning at all. March 2025, Miami Gardens, Florida, the Miami Open. One of the most prestigious WTA 1000 events on the entire professional calendar. The kind of tournament where world number one players lose genuine sleep studying their draws the night before. The kind of event where a wildcard from the Philippines ranked 140th is supposed to show up, compete with admirable spirit, lose in the first or second round, and quietly return to the challenger circuit carrying a pleasant memory. Alex Eala arrived with a wildcard in her hand and absolutely nothing to lose. Round 1, she defeated American Katie Volinets convincingly. The tennis world nodded politely and moved along. Round 2, she dismantled Jelena Ostapenko, the 2017 French Open champion, ranked 25th in the world. People genuinely paused. That result wasn't supposed to happen, but wildcards occasionally pull notable upsets. Most people shrugged and continued scrolling. Round 3 changed everything permanently. She demolished Madison Keys, the reigning Australian Open champion, ranked 5th on the entire planet, 6-4, 6-2. Not close. Not a hard-fought battle. Not a dramatic escape. Eala dismantled the Australian Open title holder methodically, clinically, without a trace of apparent nervousness, as though she had spent her entire professional career eliminating Grand Slam champions before breakfast. People stopped shrugging entirely and started paying very close attention. Then arrived the quarterfinal. Iga Swiatek, world number 2, four-time French Open title holder, arguably the most complete clay court competitor her generation has ever produced. A player who has made the sport's finest talents feel genuinely inadequate on the biggest occasions in the world. In straight sets, Eala won. First Filipino in tennis history to defeat a top 10 player in the entire Open era. The crowd at Hard Rock Stadium didn't know whether to erupt in thunderous celebration or simply stand perfectly still and absorb what they had witnessed. Eala later described her mindset as purely match by match, never looking ahead, simply treating each round as its own separate challenge to solve. She called herself lucky. But what happened on those Florida courts had absolutely nothing to do with luck or fortune. It was the direct and undeniable product of years of invisible, unrewarded labor finally made visible to an audience that had no idea it was coming. She eventually fell to world number 4 Jessica Pegula in a ferocious 3-set semifinal. A defeat that stung deeply, but one that simultaneously earned her nearly 400 ranking points, over $300,000 in prize money, and something no amount of money can purchase under any circumstances. A permanent, unremovable place in sporting history. First Filipino to reach a WTA 1000 semifinal. First Filipino inside the WTA Top 100, leaping from 140th to 75th in a single extraordinary week of tennis. Rafa Nadal himself, the man who built the academy that shaped her entire competitive identity from adolescence, took to social media to congratulate her. But back in Switzerland, another legend was watching every single point with intense focus, and he was preparing to get his coach directly involved. Paul Annacone is not simply a tennis coach. He is a living encyclopedia of what elite tennis greatness actually demands from a human being at the highest level. He guided Pete Sampras to multiple Wimbledon championships and steered Roger Federer through some of the most technically refined and dominant seasons the sport has ever witnessed. He understands better than almost anyone alive the precise combination of talent, temperament, and tactical genius that separates very good professional players from genuine all-time legends. When Annacone steps in front of a camera on Tennis Channel Live and publicly declares his admiration for someone, the entire tennis world listens with a fundamentally different and elevated level of attention. Speaking about Eala ahead of Indian Wells 2026, Annacone offered no hedging whatsoever. He praised her smile, her grace in victory, her humility after beating Swiatek, and specifically highlighted her technical capacity to absorb incoming pace and redirect it with surgical precision, converting an opponent's own power directly into a weapon aimed straight back at them. That is not a skill that emerges by accident. Federer himself built multiple championship runs on precisely that same mechanism and understanding of tennis geometry. Annacone also observed something that transcends pure technical analysis entirely. The fan phenomenon surrounding Eala, wherever she competes on this planet, is unlike almost anything the sport has witnessed in recent memory. Filipino supporters have followed her across continents, flooding venues in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and California with noise levels that tournament officials have had to actively scramble to accommodate properly. Former player Jeannie Bouchard, watching the growing hysteria unfold from the Tennis Channel studio, was asked whether she could recall any female athlete commanding this level of passionate global devotion. She hesitated thoughtfully, then offered 2 words in response: Taylor Swift. She was not entirely joking. Bouchard later expanded her comparison, referencing Manny Pacquiao at the absolute peak of his global powers and suggesting that if Eala continues performing at this level, the sky places no meaningful limit on where her story ultimately leads. Then Martina Navratilova, 18 Grand Slam titles, one of the most analytically respected voices in the entire recorded history of tennis, delivered her own assessment directly to the WTA. She described Eala as clever, skilled, and effective with her left-handed variety. But she also identified the single most critical adjustment required with characteristic precision. The serve must become a genuine weapon. More pace, more kick, more belief in her own ability to dominate from the very first ball of a point. 4-time Grand Slam champion Kim Clijsters compared Eala's cultural significance not to another tennis player, but to Michael Jordan himself. The tennis establishment wasn't merely noticing Alexandra Eala anymore. It was actively and collectively building her a monument. But not everyone was celebrating with equal enthusiasm. While legends lined up to publicly anoint her future, a storm of skepticism and mounting pressure was quietly assembling that nearly derailed the entire narrative. The central argument from critics arrived with statistical precision. Eala had exactly 1 Grand Slam main draw match victory on her record entering 2026. Her French Open debut ended in a first-round defeat. Wimbledon brought another first-round exit. The 2026 Australian Open saw her taken apart by a player ranked 99th in a match where she appeared to completely collapse mentally after dominating the opening set. The scoreline told a story about inconsistency that the social media celebrations carefully excluded from the frame. Opponents had begun systematically studying her patterns and targeting her vulnerabilities with increasing aggression and preparation. The scheduling situation at multiple tournaments added further friction, with Eala repeatedly assigned to secondary courts at inconvenient hours despite drawing the largest and most passionate crowds of anyone on the tour. The question hanging directly over Indian Wells 2026 wasn't whether the talent was real. Nobody serious doubted the talent existed. The question was whether she possessed the consistency, physical resilience, and mental architecture required to win matches against opponents who had designed their entire game plan specifically to neutralize everything she does brilliantly. Indian Wells would deliver the answer. For the first time in her professional existence, Alexandra Eala arrived at a WTA 1000 tournament as a seeded competitor. Seed number 31. A first-round bye waiting. Her name printed on the official bracket, not as a wildcard entry, but as a legitimate, ranked, fully expected contender. The Filipino army descended on the California desert in numbers that visibly and dramatically altered the atmosphere inside the entire grounds. Flags, jerseys, chants, and Tagalog, echoing off palm trees and hardcourt surfaces beneath the desert sun. For a community that had waited decades for this moment, Indian Wells 2026 wasn't just a tennis tournament. It was a coronation ceremony requiring only the performance to match. Her second-round opponent, Diana Yastremska, aggressive, powerful, precisely the profile Navratilova had specifically warned about and critics had pointed to as the ceiling. The match unfolded with brutal honesty about every documented weakness. Eala struggled, wavered, allowed her opponent back into moments that should have been sealed. The concentration lapses appeared at precisely the worst possible junctures. And then came the deciding set. The crowd locked in that specific silence formed when thousands of people collectively hold their breath as one. Eala did not panic. She implemented precisely what Navratilova had publicly prescribed. Bigger serve, held her ground, deployed her slice with genuine confidence and conviction. 4 double faults for the entire match. A direct, measurable, undeniable response to the loudest criticism aimed at her game throughout the previous year. She won. First WTA 1000 third-round appearance of her professional career, earned through genuine adversity and conscious adaptation. And waiting in round 3, Coco Gauff, world number 4, center stage at Indian Wells, the biggest match of Alexandra Eala's entire professional life. From number 143 inches the world, 1 year, to seeded contender standing across the net from the game's brightest young star, with the coaching philosophy of Roger Federer's own architect guiding every decision she makes. The crowd that fell silent during that Yastremska match wasn't silent from confusion or disinterest. They were silent because they recognized with absolute clarity what they were witnessing. Not a player surviving by the narrowest of margins. A player arriving at the place she had always been quietly, invisibly, relentlessly building toward. The ghost of Federer's legacy placed its hand on the shoulder of something genuinely new. And the question this story deliberately leaves open is the one that deserves your honest answer. Is Alex Eala simply the next great tennis player? Or is she the first true champion from an entirely new tennis continent, pushing open a door that the sport will never, under any circumstances, be able to close again?